Chapter 11. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 11. EXP points. Kevin searched around the first floor of the library and picked up as many books as he could about magic. Most of them listing and describing the most common magics. Dan wasn't too bothered and decided to just select a random fiction book to read. He searched for books that has a mutual connection with the system or trilling thing he had, but unluckily so far, he found none. The two sat at their tables while Kevin started to flicker away in the library. After skimming through several books, he had been unable to find a single one that sounded like his system, nor did he find anything talking about trilling. Dan had kept a close eye on Kevin and had noticed the type of books he had been picking out. "What's with all the books? Are you looking for something in particular?" Kevin thought about it for a while before giving Dan an answer. He didn't know what to answer, but after Dan saw that Kevin was silent, he decided to put up another question. "Well, is there anything specific you're looking for?" Kevin sighed before answering him. "Not really. Although I found something very interesting in one of those books. Have you ever heard of someone who possesses an elf, fairy and human characteristics? Like being someone who is of those three races?" Dan suddenly started to laugh out loud. "What are you, crazy? I've never heard of something like that. How would someone be an elf and still be a fairy? Sure, some people can be half elf, half human, but being an elf, fairy and human is really crazy to say. Are you sure you have not accidentally grabbed a fantasy book about fake superheroes and immortals? Or you came across a story written by those stupid, dullard humans?" Kevin flinched as he heard Dan call humans dullards. "You're probably not an human, so you must think they are dullards for not having magics like elves and fairies," although Kevin felt a little embarrassed by Dan's reaction towards the question he asked. Yet, he understood this reaction was pretty normal. Would he have reacted any differently if he tells him that he used to be inhuman but was now someone having the characteristics of all three races? Kevin continued to look around the library to see if there was anything else he could find. Eventually, he had gone through every single one of the books detailing about races and magics. Kevin then considered trying his chances by going a floor above where there were some pure mage and spell wizard students. "Maybe there's something up there, but I can't imagine what the academy would do to me for breaking the rules, especially on the first day. I can't be on a blacklist after finally getting out of my father's clutches in the forest," Kevin thought. As Kevin continued to walk around the library, he considered what Dan had said. Perhaps he really should venture into the fiction section and see if he might be lucky. What's the worst thing that could happen? A book titled "The Truth About the Three-Race Man" immediately caught his interest. Kevin took out the book and gave it a quick look. Kevin couldn't help but sate his curiosity, so he started to read the book. After reading and skimming through the book, Kevin found most of it to be useless. A lot of the things that a three-race person didn't relate to him at all. The only thing he could relate to was having the ears of an elf, and also he felt like there is still a bit of human in him. Eventually, Kevin decided to close the book and call it a day. It didn't seem like he was going to find anything from the first floor of the library. As soon as Kevin closed the book though, he heard a familiar sound and the pop-up screen appeared at the corner of his eyes again. "What?" Kevin blurted out. Kevin stared long and hard at the message and reread it multiple times. "It can't be. Why did I get EXP all of a sudden?" Chapter 12. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 12. First fight. Kevin wanted to know more about how the system works out, but since he wasn't able to get a good book to read, he had no option but to play according to the system's wishes. If not for the system, he wouldn't have been where he was now. When Kevin finished checking things out at the library, he noticed that Dan had disappeared from the table and was no longer there. He must have gotten bored and gone somewhere else. "I'll probably see him later in our room," Kevin thought. Right now, there wasn't much he could do about it. He could only live his everyday life as a normal person and wait till he reached level 10. It seems like there is something that the system wants to show him when he reached that level, so he can't help but wait till he get to level 10. Every EXP point is so special to him, but as he thought about it, he discovered that he still had a long way to go before he could reach level 10. As Kevin left the library, he decided to head to the battle arena. A thought had seized his mind and he wanted to try something out. He was walking through the school hallway when he saw a kid being pushed up against the wall by another student. The boy on the wall looked like he had already been hit a few times and had bruises on his face. "Please, I won't do that again. I'm sorry." The student cried, but the bully won't stop hitting the student. "You think I care about your pleadings? You think your 'I'm sorry' will do anything to this situation? After you failed to steal what I told you to steal, huh?" The bully gave him another punch in the stomach. Gosh, he's gonna kill this student. Kevin looked around and saw that there were no one around. Kevin was debating in himself whether or not to get involved in the first place. He knew if this student gets killed here, no one will know what happened or who killed him. He didn't know why, but he felt like he should interfere and help the student that was being bullied. He quickly made up his mind. He had wanted to test out his strength to see how strong he had gotten. He wasn't able to fight ever since he had got his system, and it seemed like fate had presented him with the perfect opponent. Although he didn't know how much power this student have, he knew that with his experience in fighting with his father's disciple, he could still win the fight. The kid that was being bullied looked to have given up, his face was red with tears and had bruises all over his face. It seemed like this was not the first time he was being bullied. In the past, the student had tried fighting back. It was when the bullying had only just started at his old school. He had thrown back a punch and had even managed to hit the person in the face, but it had only made things worse. As a result, he had been beaten 10 times harder than normal, and ever since, the bullying had only worsened. Kevin's blood was boiling as he saw how the boy was being hit multiple times. Surprisingly, while he was thinking of what to do, the system had suddenly popped out something for him. Chapter 13. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 13. The Lady Fairy. As the system gave him the notification, Kevin was glad that the system was in support of him fighting the bully. Not only that, but the reward also did its part in convincing him to fight. He would be getting 50 experience points if he's able to successfully land an attack and defeated the bully. "Sorry boy, you'll be the first elf I'll be fighting in this academy," Kevin thought as he swiftly ran towards the student. The bully could see Kevin running towards him with his fists clenched hard, but it was too late for him to dodge as the attack had already been planted into his stomach. Arg! The student groaned in pain as his hands were holding onto his stomach. The punch was so powerful that the boy felt his lungs coming out of his mouth. Gosh, this guy hits hard. But how could someone be so strong as this? The elf turned to look at Kevin. He is not yet a pure mage student or a mage soldier, he is still an ordinary student like him. With the looks of it, he was a newcomer as him. But even if he was a newcomer, how could he be stronger than him? He must have great magics and martial arts skill to be able to punch him this hard. The bully was a level 2 elf with just 2 sets of magics. Elves have levels of power, and the level depends on the amount of magic they possess and could control. An elf within the range of level 1 to 5 could only possess 1 magic skill at most. Those ranging 6 to 10 can only manage to be able to control 2 at once, which actually takes a lot of years to accomplish. This power ranking is built mainly for the newbie students and mage soldiers. They range from level 1 to 10, but when they reach the stage of the spell wizard or pure mage, the power ranking changes, and what they start to count are ranks. Rank S, A, B and D. Rank D is the lowest while rank S is the strongest. After a pure mage or spell wizard has reached rank S, he or she will be promoted to the rank of a mage master or wizard master. These roles differs according to the line you choose. If a newbie student could control his magic, he could simply become a pure mage student who would have the ability of learning spells and be able to expand his evolution of magic limit. Meaning, he'll focus like every mage on having more than 2 magics. Although over the years, only an elf was able to achieve this goal, but due to the inability to control it well, he lost his life. But mages are not relenting and are trying all their best to have more than 2 magics. The second choice that a newbie student have is to become a spell wizard, since he can't create any magic nor learn how to control it. He could possibly learn magic tricks and spells and become a wizard, but not a mage. These roles went on further, as a pure mage student could become a more skilled mage with the title of a master mage, while a spell wizard could become a more skilled person with the title of a master wizard or wizard master. What did I do? The student cried out, still feeling the impact of the punch in his stomach. His voice was shaky as he spoke. Kevin could see how fearful he had gotten. Truthfully, the student was scared of him and he's trying to escape from him. Why are you bullying him? What did he do wrong? Kevin asked as he stepped forward towards the bully. He passed his boundary and I got to teach him a lesson. What does that have to do with you? The bully said, raising his voice a bit higher. Kevin wanted to beat the bully up again, but he decided to let him be. You're not worth my beating, he said as he turned backwards. The student had jumped at him from behind, but Kevin was quick to react as he gave the elf a devastating punch on his face. The elf was sent flying backwards into the air as his back smashed on the wall of the hallway. Kevin moved away from the bully as he approached the student that was being bullied, and offered him a hand. The student took his hand but had immediately passed out before he could even stand up. Hey, get up! Kevin panicked as he held on to the student's arms. The bully, seeing the perfect chance to escape, had quickly ran away, leaving Kevin alone with the student who had fainted. Heck, that moron ran away. He cursed, but then he remembered that they were shown during the tour, where the school clinic was located. He carried the student in his arms and headed for the clinic bay. But on his way, he had received multiple notifications and he carefully read them all. Man, this is nice. I'm 10 points away from getting to level 2. Fighting bullies will surely help a lot. Kevin smiled to himself as he approached the clinic. On his way to the clinic, Reed and Zoe had saw Kevin running towards the clinic with a student in his arms. What happened? Did someone got hurt? Reed asked, and the 2 siblings could only run towards the clinic to know what was happening. Upon getting to the clinic, Kevin met a young lady fairy who seemed to be in her teens. She just recently finished her 5-year academy course and she turned out to be one of the best students in the school. Her colorful wings were flapping beautifully, causing Kevin to gasp in amazement. Apart from that, the fairy was also beautiful, and to be honest, Kevin was blinded by her beauty at the first sight. What happened to him? The fairy asked after Kevin had placed the boy on a stretcher. She had placed her hands on the student and had healed all his wounds. She was looking directly into Kevin's eyes and he felt like she would kiss him at any moment. $++. Underscore / dot hashtag at you underscore dollar hashtag asterisk r underscore / plus dot so hashtag at dollar beautiful dollar hashtag / Kevin uttered. Even though his resistance had increased by 1, Kevin was still struck by the girl's beauty charm. Finally, Kevin got back to his senses and he overcame the fairy's charm. Gosh, what is that for? Kevin shouted at the fairy. The fairy flinched as she flapped her wings, shocked at Kevin's reaction. Ever since she has been using her fairy beauty to play tricks on males, Kevin would be the first person to stay unaffected by her beauty. Wait, how did you? How is that possible? The fairy stammered. At that moment, Reed and Zoe had entered the clinic only to see the fairy glancing surprisingly at the angry Kevin. Reed had noticed Kevin's angry face and had popped out the question. What is happening here? He asked. Kevin quickly changed his expression. I saw him being bullied by a student, but suddenly he fainted and the bully ran away instead of saving him. I brought him here for treatment. There's nothing wrong, let's go. Kevin said, his glance was still on the fairy's face. The 3 elves exited the clinic as they head towards their dorm room. Even still, Reed and Zoe are not convinced that something is not happening. Kevin, are you sure there's nothing wrong? Reed asked again. Chapter 14. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 14. Seducing charm. Kevin sighed deeply as his hands brushed past his dark, long hair. They had slowed down and were just at a few meters close to the dorm building. Zoe was standing on Kevin's right-hand side while Reed was on the other side. Do that fairy always do that to her patients and anyone who comes to the clinic? Kevin asked, feeling a bit awkward as he popped out the question. He's not the chatty type due to his upbringing, so he's finding it difficult to talk. He's also being careful with what he says so others won't suspect that he's a runaway child and someone who wasn't brought up in the city. What do you mean? Is the fairy not your type? Reed replied, and Zoe, from where he was, had gave him a smack on the head. Idiot, don't you understand what he means? He's talking about the seducing charm that the fairy uses on every handsome elf or fairy she meets. Seducing charm? Kevin scoffed. She's trying to seduce me. Why? Could there be any reason for such a pretty fairy to seduce you like that? It's because you're handsome. Kevin smiled in disgust as Zoe said this. He couldn't believe a fairy would fall for him. Shit, what does she think of me? Xian scoffed. Well, he couldn't argue about that fact. It was all because of the strange ring that he wore. His race was changed and even his appearance had differed a lot from how he looks like before. All thanks to the system, he got the chance to be a student in the Mage Academy. While Kevin was lost in his thoughts, Reed had suddenly hit him on the shoulder slightly, drawing him out of his daze. He quickly acted normal, but he could hear the two students laughing. Who knows? You might be selected to be Lena's future husband. Reed said, and the two students laughed again. I even heard that there are 2,000 elf men and fairy men who had proposed to her. Some are offering her gifts all the time just to draw her attention, but still, Lena hasn't made her decision. She said her future husband would be someone special, someone who everyone would love and want to be with, someone who is handsome and wiser than her in all ways. Zoe explained. Not only that, but Lena had written down these qualities for every man that wishes to marry her and said, only someone who have all these qualities would be her husband. A contest had even taken place to see the elf or fairy who everyone loves and wants to be with, and out of the 1,053 guys that participated in the contest, only 502 remained. Why? Are the guys so desperate that they can't marry any other fairy apart from her? Kevin finally spoke after listening to Zoe's discussion. Come on, we're talking about money here. Lena's parents are the most richest family in our kingdom. Zoe said, making sure he emphasized the word richest so they could know the worth. Reed rolled his eyes before giving his brother, Zoe, a disgusting look. Shit, don't you read the royal magazine? The royal family are the richest, not the Lena's family. Actually, the Lena's family are rich, but they are the second richest family in the whole elf and fairy land. The Lena's family used to be king when the elves and fairies hadn't agreed to live together. The Lena's family were not chosen by the people, so they weren't made king. If not, they would have been wealthier than our current king. They only got lucky to be chosen as king. The Lena's family would make a better king. Are you talking bad about the king by siding with the Lena's family? You should be careful or someone might hear you. You know the repercussions. Reed blurted out, but Zoe quickly changed the topic of discussion. They have entered their dorm room, so they at least are able to discuss whatever they wish to discuss without anyone listening. When they entered the room, they had surprisingly met someone sitting on one of the beds in the room. What? How? Chapter 15. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 15. Coincidence. The two students are walking towards their dorm room, but they had to climb a few stairs before they could get to their floor. Because of the many crowds and students that are passing, Zoe started whispering silently as he gist Kevin a bit more of the royal family's personality. I heard that the wife of the current king, the queen, had firstly given birth to a child, but the child was inhuman and was drowned in the river on the very day he was born. Zoe whispered, and fear came over Kevin at once. A newborn baby was drowned in the river for being inhuman and not an elf. That's really cruel. Is it a crime to be inhuman and not what you wanted? Is it the baby's fault that you were impregnated by inhuman? This rule of discrimination really needs changing in this land. They can't just discriminate other races because of their stupid rule. Be calm. I wouldn't say it is cruel, and I won't say it's not, but what exactly is the reason why humans can't live among elves and fairies? Reed wondered. The three students sighed deeply at the same time before entering their room. But they instantly froze as they saw a beautiful lady sitting on one of the beds that was in their room. Who are you? Zoe asked. The fairy lady blinked twice before shutting her eyes as if she's struggling to talk within herself. She immediately fluttered her eyes open and glanced at the three students. She had suddenly stood up as she approached them. Her long, shiny, purple hair were moving from side to side as she walked. She was a bit shorter than the three students, but her proportions were accurate. Her figures and everything was enough for a king to fall for her. Just as the fairy lady that Kevin met at the clinic had a purple hair and beautiful proportions, this lady also have hers. The only difference is that, the fairy lady is using some kind of ability to make herself look more prettier than the one in their room. I don't want to come before since all of you are all males, but I thought it over because one of you made me fall for him. I wouldn't mention the person's name yet, cause I can see that you're all curious to know. The lady said as she stared at Reed before turning to look at Zoe. I thought you were four. Where's your fourth? The door of the room had suddenly opened and Dan could be seen sweating as he entered. It was as if he had just ran a 30-minute marathon race. Oh, here he is. The lady exclaimed, causing Dan's brows to furrow in curiosity. What's going on here? He asked, but there was no one who could answer his question. So, as I was saying, I agreed to come to your room because of one of you. The person is so handsome, but like I said, I won't mention names. She glanced at Dan before throwing a wink at the last student, Kevin. Can you tell us who you are? Please. Dan asked, feeling impatient and worn out. He could only feel better if he could have a long refreshing evening shower. Easy boy, I will tell you. But promise not to freak out. Not many people have seen my face, but if they hear the name of my family, they'll freak out. Then tell us your name. Reed said, eyes full of curiosity. I am Lexa, the second and last daughter of the used-to-be fairy king. The Monroe family. As Lexa said this, the jaws of the three students dropped in amazement. It seems like the students of this year's set are not going to take it easy. Lexa is Lena's younger sister. Lena was an old student who had just finished her academy last year. Lexa was her sister and she'll be staying in the same room with the four males. Is this a coincidence? They were just coming from the older sister's office and they had met the younger sister in their dorm room. You are Lexa. Lena's younger sister. The daughter of King Monroe. Zoe asked as he stepped forward to approach her. Yes, I am. It's nice to meet you. Again. Lexa replied with a smile. As if they had planned it before, the three students had suddenly rushed to hug Lexa. Kevin could only stand and wonder what was going on. But he's trying his best not to act ignorant. Yet he can't help but wonder why the three students had went to hug her. Chapter 16. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 16. Lexa's question. Dan noticed that Kevin was standing behind, wondering what was happening, and he had went to approach him. Lexa used to be our childhood friend in Elf Fairy, elementary school, but when we started our high school, we parted from each other and since then we haven't seen each other until now. We even didn't know she was royalty. She treats us as her brother and in the time when we are hungry she gives us out of her own food. We are indebted to her. Dan explained, but Lexa, who was already sitting with the two elves by her side, had smiled and started talking. Who's indebted to who? Don't embarrass me, Dan. Lexa smiled again and Dan had momentarily smiled back. It's a good thing you're staying with us, we'll get to see each other more often. And we'll be able to chat as much as we want. Reed said. Yes, I'm happy I was placed in your dorm room. I really didn't know you will be attending this school because of your situation, you know, envied him, yeah. We obviously were trying our best to attend the school, but it wasn't enough. We wouldn't have been here if it hadn't been for this guy. He gave each of us 3 emerald gemstones out of his own pocket and said just as long as we take him to the academy with him, he'll give us for free. Isn't that crazy? We're indebted to him also. If not for him, we wouldn't have been here. Kevin jerked Dan on the stomach for flaunting him in public. You shouldn't have said that. What's giving you free gemstones had to do with being indebted? Kevin chuckled. Lexa glanced at Kevin with a smile. The smile was so beautiful that it had made Kevin to instantly smile back at her. Shit. Why am I smiling at her? Stop, Kevin, stop. Kevin tried to act normal. Come on, you guys should introduce each other. I'm Kevin, it's a wonderful privilege to meet you. Kevin said as he stretched his hands for an handshake. Lexa instantly took his hands and after a few swings of their hands, they let go. It's nice meeting you too. Wait, you look quite familiar, have we met before? Or perhaps, do you know me? Lexa asked. Kevin flinched a bit, but as he thought about it, he knew no one else knows him apart from his father and his disciples. He wasn't allowed to step out of the forest, so no one could ever say they knew him somewhere. I'm afraid not, I don't think we've met anywhere, and sorry to say this, I don't think I know you anywhere. Kevin replied politely. Oh, is that so? You look just like the Elven Queen. Her eyes, her nose, even the color of her hair, you look a lot familiar. Lexa said again, noticing his actions and words. I don't think I look like her. You must have been mistaken. Unfortunately, I don't have a mother. She died when I was a baby. Kevin replied, feeling a bit nauseous. And your father? Lexa asked again, making Kevin to feel agitated to answer her question. He was getting weary of all the questions, and him being the introvert type was finding it difficult to talk. He had to process the question in his mind before giving out the reply. Dan and the other elves were also getting tired of Lexa's question, but they couldn't talk because of how important she is. My father is an hunter, he's probably in the forest hunting. Kevin smirked after successfully coming up with a catchy lie. Oh, I see. But how did you get that pendant on your neck? Dan had had enough. He had summoned the boldness in him and had immediately spoke after Lexa asked the question. Lexa, how about we walk around the school this evening? Me and you could chat along as we go, or what do you think? Dan asked, jerking Kevin from the front. He was standing in front of Kevin and his arms were jerking Kevin. It was a signal for Kevin to leave. Kevin had hurriedly left even before Lexa could give her reply. He was actually going somewhere before he met the boy that was being bullied, so heading back there is not too late for him. Chapter 17. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 17. Strange Ninja Fairy. Kevin was strolling down the hallway, as he was making his way towards the training hall that they were shown during the tour. Even though Kevin seems fine, yet he was bothered as his mind was flooded with thoughts of who exactly his mother was. He had once asked his father, the wizard, but he would only answer back by saying, when the time comes, I will tell you everything. Wait, what exactly is that everything that my father doesn't want me to know? What secret is my father keeping from me? Kevin wondered, but suddenly, he had heard a notification sound from the system. What? Kevin exclaimed as he quickly activated his elven eyes. Suddenly, Kevin could see about 6 elven auras approaching him. Seeing that they were only 6, Kevin cancelled his elven eyes to see the elves properly. Truly, the 6 are all elves and they all looked dangerous. They are quite muscular and couldn't be called one of the students of the school. They could only be part of the academy soldiers, or teachers who were paid to kidnap as many students as possible. Whoever they are, Kevin wants to escape from them as soon as possible. He's not so strong to challenge people like these, they are stronger than him and he could not survive fighting them. The system had also proved to him that the only way he could survive is to escape by every means possible. The 6 elves had surrounded Kevin and they all have one thing in common, fire magic. They can control fire so well, due to them being above the rank of a mage soldier. If any student would want to fight these 6 elves, they won't have any chance of winning at all. Who are you guys? What do you want? Kevin asked, thinking of how to escape. That was exactly the problem. He has been cornered by the elves before he could know it and it will be extremely difficult for him to escape at this point. Shit, what do I do? I don't have any magic presently. Kevin was worried. He was more worried when he saw that these elves also have weapons with them. One of the elves was about to charge at Kevin that an arrow was sent flying at him. The elf quickly dodged the arrow and sliced the other arrows that were coming his way into 2 pieces with his sword. The other elves were alerted as they saw that someone was hiding and shooting arrows at them. Immediately, someone had landed before them. The person was in a ninja costume with his eyes and mouth covered. But what was surprising was that the person was a fairy, his wings were flapping against each other as he landed right beside Kevin. Hey handsome, can you do me a favor? The fairy said, but Kevin thought that the voice sounds familiar and feminine. This is not a male's voice, who could this person be? He wondered. Stay behind me and don't get hurt. They won't be able to get closer to me anyway. The ninja fairy said as he turned to look the 6 elves who were now creating a battle formation. Remember me. The fairy said. A mocking smile could be sensed in her tone. Yeah, it's me. I'm not letting you go this time around. The fairy raised his 2 hands up and lightning from the sky could be seen empowering his body at once. Lightning magic. He didn't use this magic last time, did he? One of the elves said, his voice almost shaking. As if they were about to face their most feared enemy, the 6 elves had started getting scared. Out of all magic present, lightning magic is the hardest and rarest magic someone can learn. Only the strong-minded could learn such magic or they may reach their limit while learning it. And once they have reached their limit, the next thing is death. So most of the elves and fairies prefers not to learn lightning. Seeing someone with a lightning magic as strong as this means they could never win against him. So the 6 elves started making plans of escaping. Come on, fight me. The ninja fairy shouted, but the 6 elves had held onto each other and suddenly, like a flash of light, they had disappeared, leaving only the dark smoke from the black magic they had just used. I know those brats will run away. The fairy said as he turned to give Kevin a glance. Well, I wasn't ready to fight them anyway. Showing them my power will drive fears into their hearts and it will take a while before they come back here. The fairy was now walking towards Kevin and with every step he was taking, it looks too feminine. He has been among males for over 16 years so he knew how male walks. Kevin was trying his best not to talk about it, he would wait till the ninja tells him who exactly he is. But with this move that the fairy was making towards him, Kevin was stepping backwards at the same time. He kept on stepping backwards but he didn't realize this until his back had touched the wall of the hall and he was cornered by the strange ninja fairy. Who are you? Kevin managed to blurt out as he noticed that the fairy's mouth was getting close to his own. He's not trying to kiss me, is he? Wait, is he even a male? She smells like a female and her voice sounds feminine. Why is she trying to kiss me, is she an harlot or what? Kevin almost freaked out but he suddenly flinched as was suddenly carried up into the air by the fairy. He couldn't believe he was flying in the air, it was a bit cold but he enjoyed the breeze. He could see the full view of the academy while in the air, and even though it was night time, there were electricity everywhere, making the academy to look more beautiful. But Kevin suddenly snapped out of his daze as he struggled to draw the fairy's attention. "Hey! Where are you taking me to?" Kevin shouted so the fairy would be able to hear him clearly. "To know who I am," the fairy said without even glancing at Kevin. Chapter 18. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 18. Dazed. It didn't take long for the two of them to reach their destination. When Kevin opened his eyes to see where they are, he discovered that they were inside the school's clinic, but inside an apartment of some type. The fairy turned his back at Kevin and had started removing the ninja clothes that he was wearing, and after successfully removing them all, he turned around to face Kevin. Actually, Kevin was surprised at first seeing the fairy, who was now wearing a purple mini gown. The fairy had even loosened the hair band that he used to pack his hair, and now, a long feminine pinkish purple hair was in full display. Kevin slowly lifted his eyes to take a look at who the person really was, and it happened to be the clinic teacher and the daughter of the former fairy royal leaders, Lena. Her hourglass figure shape and seducing eyelashes were enough to draw a man into the bed. Kevin blinked a few times as he tried to gain a reposition of himself. The girl in front of him was just too beautiful, and if he's not careful, he might jump on her at any time. "Hey buddy, wake up." Kevin could hear something talking in his mind, but his mind was too far away to hear what it was saying. He had started walking towards the beauty that was in front of him, dazed and fully charmed with seduction. His eyes glimmered with romance and joy as he approached Lena. It was as if he had wanted to do this but wasn't able to. Finally, he had gotten close the fairy, close enough to be able to wrap his hands around her waist. They were too close to each other that Lena could feel something warm prodding towards her. Kevin was about to kiss her that something terrible happened. Actually, he wouldn't have gotten out of his daze if the fairy hadn't activated more of her seducing charm to keep Kevin dazed to the end. The fairy had thought that her seducing charm was what made Kevin fall for him, and to keep him dazed till they make love with each other, she had made her seducing charm grow more stronger to captivate Kevin's mind. But unfortunately, she was damn so wrong. Kevin had quickly gotten back to his senses. Their lips were just in a few space apart from each other, but the moment Kevin realized what he was doing, he quickly withdrew back as he freed his hands that were holding tight onto Lena's waist and stepped a bit backwards. Lena was shocked by Kevin's reaction, and for a moment, she stood like a statue as she cursed internally for letting go of him. What? Why didn't my charm work on him? But he was right there, he was about to do it. Man, I need to taste this guy, he's my type, but why is my charm not working on him? Lena kept on cursing. She tried to stabilize herself as she stared at Kevin's frozen face. It was clearly written on his face that he was shocked by what had just happened. Yes, of course, they were too close to each other, too close that Kevin felt like it was something he needed to do at all cost, and he felt like he won't be at rest if he didn't do that thing. But something must be done, he must get out of here at this moment. Where is the door? I need to exit this place. Kevin screamed in his head, but the more he looked around to open each doors, he noticed that they were all locked. Kevin, please be patient. I'm really sorry, I don't know why I'm so obsessed with you. It's just that, you're too different from all other guys I've met. You're just too different. Lena pleaded, but despite everything she was saying, Kevin was paying no attention to her as he was still looking around, checking all doors for an exit. Kevin. Lena called after realizing that Kevin wasn't listening to what she was saying. Where is the exit? I need to get out of here. Please. Kevin finally spoke, the tone of his voice was a bit loud and shaky. Lena couldn't say any more. It was obvious that this guy won't be patient, he was really in haste to leave the apartment, and no matter what the fairy says, he just wouldn't listen. The fairy could understand, but before opening the door, she picked up a letter that she seemed to have written a couple of hours before now and had inserted it into a rose-designed envelope. She moved closer to Kevin as she put it into the pocket of his uniform. After that, she clicked her fingers and the door was opened for her. Kevin, those guys from tonight will be after you as from now on, be sure to stay safe or you might be captured by them. Lena said, but Kevin just scoffed before exiting the room, heading straight for his dorm room. I will be watching you, darling. Lena said silently, enough for only herself to hear. Chapter 19. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 19. Level Up. Finally, Kevin had gotten back to his dorm room. As he shut his door, he discovered that the other students are already asleep, including Lexa. Lexa was sleeping on the vacant bed that was beside Kevin's, and Kevin could only think of one thing. These two sisters are different from each other. How pleasant would it be if your sister could be just as gentle as you are? Kevin thought before slumping into his bed for a nighttime rest. He's emotionally and mentally drained, but a long night's sleep would make him feel better. While he was still waiting for sleep to come, Kevin recalled Lena placing an envelope into his pocket, and he had hurriedly brought it out to check what was written in it. But because it was already dark and Kevin was feeling a bit sleepy, he returned it back into the pocket of his uniform and then went back to bed. Thinking of what other things he need to do, Kevin recalled that the system had given him a quest while he was almost kidnapped, and then he quickly checked to see if he had any messages. Yeah, I know. Kevin smiled as he knew it was probably the rewards he received from the quest given to him. If there was something he would use to remember Lena, that would be her, saving him tonight and also granting him a quick completion to his quest. What do you expect? Yes. Kevin replied, and the system beeped twice in approval. Xin could feel a little bit of pain inside of him, but it didn't take a few minutes that it had stopped. Thanks, but can you explain what trilling means? Kevin asked, but there was no one to answer him. Whoa whoa whoa. I finally got a magic. Kevin screamed for joy in his mind as he couldn't help but continue reading the notifications from the system. This was good news to him. Kevin was amazed when he saw the new skills that he was given had an indication, explaining how it could be used. The system was really surprising him. Now he knew he have a magic, but the only thing that is left is how to use it. It was nighttime and it won't be good if he practice his magic in the room. He might wake someone up. This seems nice to Kevin, he's surely going to try everything out tomorrow. Thanks to Lena once again, he was able to level up and gain these rewards. Kevin yawned as he stared at the other informations that the system was showing him. He had a lot of stuffs to do tomorrow. He needs to test out his new powers, and he also needs to find out a way of getting more stronger. As he thought of places he needed to go, sleep started creeping in, and before he could even realize it, he had already slept off. The next he opened his eyes, it was early in the morning, an alarm had sounded, waking all the students up to prepare for the day. Although, there wasn't much to do for this week. Classes begins next week, so students were allowed to do as they wish for this week. After everyone in Kevin's room had gotten dressed up, they started discussing where each would be going, and everyone started talking. I'll be heading for the weapon hall, Reed and I saw a lot of weapons there and we plan to borrow some of it to fight. Zoe said. What about you, Lexa? Dan suddenly popped out the question. I don't have anywhere in mind to go to, maybe staying in the room would be better. Lexa answered. Well, I'm heading for the school's museum, we could go together, or what do you think, Lexa? Dan pouted out, winking at Lexa playfully. Yeah, you're going with me after breakfast. Dan suddenly replied, not giving Lexa the chance to speak. Lexa could only glance at Dan, giving him a scornful look. After each of them had said where they would be going, Zoe noticed that Kevin had not said anything yet, and he had asked him the question. Hey Kev, where are you heading to, for the day? Zoe asked. As if everyone had anticipated to ask him the question, they all stared at him for an answer, making Kevin to chuckle nervously. He cleared his throat before talking. Do any one of you know where I could go if I want to fight using my fist? I want the place to be plainly a fist fight. He asked, showing a little bit of hope of getting an answer. He had thought that asking them is quite silly. They were brought into the school for the first time and at the same time, could it be possible for them to know about a place where he could go if he wants to fight several opponents? He must also be careful, he's not sure if he can use his newly gotten magic yet. Sure, you can go to the martial arts hall and ask for a spar from any of the students available, as long as there are students available, they will surely accept. Dan said, although he knew most students wouldn't be there as they prefer using their magics than fighting with fists. Between the Magic Arts Hall and the Martial Arts Hall, the students would prefer going to the Magic Arts Hall than going to the Martial Arts Hall. The probability ratio is about 90/100. 10/100. Is that okay? Dan asked after a long silence. Yeah, sure. I'll give it a try, and if I can't see anyone, I may head into the library. Kevin blurted out as he noticed Dan's change of behavior. He was doing this probably because of Lexa. He's acting like he is boss over me. What the hell? Kevin cursed within himself. The 5 students then exited their dorm rooms as they headed towards the canteen for breakfast. The canteen was just a few meters walk from where their dorm room was, so it didn't take long for them to get there. But there was an extreme long queue as they got there. Over 300 students were waiting for their food to be served. And just as the queue was decreasing, more students kept on coming and the queue kept on getting longer. BL.net. While Kevin and the other 4 students approached the queue, 6 students had suddenly passed by them as they went to the beginning of the queue to drag the ones that were at the front away. Chapter 20. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 20. Bullies are a threat. The students who had been on the queue for a long time was dragged out of their position, and the 6 students who had just arrived took their foods in place of them. Gosh, those guys won't stop with their crazy behavior. Zoe complained. They have been like this since high school, always bullying one student and the other. I hate them like hell. Can't the teachers or soldiers stop them? Kevin said. Stop what? Even if they interfere, that doesn't mean they won't repeat what they did before. Reed said. Back in our high school, those guys bullies every students. They are so adamant with the act that they had once bullied a teacher and the admin had no other option but to call for their parents, as they had plans of suspending the students. But when their parents came, they happened to be the wives of the 6 leaders of the 6 elven villages. Dan explained. Of the truth, a meeting was held between the 6 parents and with the admins, but the next thing we noticed was the 6 bullies were told to return back into the class. But ever since that day, we've never seen the teacher that was bullied again. Until we finished our high school, the 6 elves were not suspended and they kept on with their bullying. How stupid. Really? I don't know, something like that happens in schools. I've never experienced anyone being bullied in my school, nor have I been bullied. Lexa blurted out, while her hands ran down her long purple hair. That's because you've never experienced it. And your school consists of only rich kids, there wouldn't be a bully who would be a bother to you anyway. Reed said as he stepped a bit forward as the queue moved. Kevin had been silent ever since the 4 students have been talking. He has never attended in high school, so he didn't know much about bullies. He never knew something like that even existed nor could exist in such a school as this Mage Academy. He couldn't believe that there are bullies as wicked as this, in the academy, a school where he thought there was discipline and morality. Although he had met a bully yesterday, he didn't think he was a bully. It might be maybe because he didn't know much about what a bully could do. But now that Dan had explained it, he understood how much of a threat a bully is to the society. I guess the academy will fail to discipline the bullies just as the admins of your high school had failed to suspend the bullies of your school. Kevin finally said, and Lexa, who was in the queue, in front of him, had shook her head positively as she took a quick glance at him. Kevin couldn't understand, why did she give him that glance? Is it what he said or what could it be? At long last, the queue got to the turn of the 5 students and they finally got to receive their foods. After which they all went inside the canteen to sit around a table. But as they were eating in the canteen, they all noticed something. A few meters away from where the Kevins are, were seated about 22 students all dressed in hoodies. The 6 bullies who Kevin had saw outside were in red-colored hoodies while another 4 of them are in yellow-colored hoodies. And about 12 of the students had black hoodies on them. They were all playing what cards, and it seems like they had all finished eating. It wasn't the cards they were playing but the immense amount of noise they were making that drew everyone's attention. Gosh, these guys are so noisy, Lexa said as she rose up to challenge the students, but Dan had quickly pushed her back into her seat. What are you trying to do? Dan asked with a frown. He was holding Lexa's hands so tightly that she wasn't able to move her hands. Why? Don't you see how much noise they are making? If no one would challenge them, I would. Lexa answered as she rose up once again. Is it because you're the daughter of a noble? You think everything can be done with your affluence? Dan unexpectedly blurted out, causing Lexa's brows to furrow. She immediately snatched her hands away from him and stared deadly at him. How dare you say that? Lexa shouted, causing everyone, including the bullies, to glance towards her. Lexa, calm down, I didn't meant it that way. Dan tried to calm her down but she was way too angry to listen. She shifted her gaze from Dan to the noisy bullies who had caused it all. Despite the quarrel that was going on between Lexa and Dan, the bullies still continued with their noisy chit-chat and game. Lexa had then pointed a finger towards them. You guys are so noisy, can't you go play them in your rooms? Lexa shouted with anger, but as if the students were intentionally trying to provoke her, they increased the volume of their noise. Lexa had had enough of this. She picked up a cup of water and went towards the student that stood closer to her. While Kevin was busy watching the quarrels that was coming from his right and left, something had suddenly sounded in his mind. I hate being ignored, Lexa uttered as she raised her hands and poured the cup of water that was in her hands on the boy's body.